The fluorescent lighting of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport glared down on the polished floor, reflecting off rolling suitcases and hurrying shoes. It was just past 9 a.m., and the domestic terminal buzzed with the usual weekday travel rush. Business travelers murmured into phones, families herded children toward gates, and flight announcements echoed from ceiling speakers. Amid it all, Noelle Carter moved with quiet purpose. At 38, Noelle carried herself with the calm confidence of someone used to holding power, but not flaunting it. Dressed in pressed black slacks and a sea-green blouse under a light gray blazer, she blended in perfectly among the morning professionals. Her leather carry-on rolled smoothly behind her, matching the laptop satchel slung over her shoulder. Her gate, D25, was a mere 3-minute walk away. Her flight back to D.C. was on time. And then, "Excuse me, ma'am, can you stop for a moment?" The voice came from her right, too polite and too flat. Noelle turned slightly, clocking the badge and the uniform before she even registered the man's face. Officer Bradley Stevens, 50s, white, stocky build, clean-shaven with a salt-and-pepper military cut. He wore the forced smile of someone who already believed he had the upper hand. Noelle paused, instinctively straightening her shoulders. "Is something wrong, officer?" she asked, her voice measured, polite but firm. Another officer appeared a second later, Officer Lin Chen, mid-30s, lean, uncertain in his movements. He stood just to her left, forming a quiet pincer maneuver. Noelle's brows twitched for a split second, but she kept her expression unreadable. She'd been through TSA 10 minutes ago, cleared, verified, wanded, scanned. Stevens nodded with exaggerated cordiality. "Just a routine secondary screening. Random, of course. Just a quick look at your bags." Chen gestured toward a temporary screening area off to the side, partially secluded by portable barriers. A folding table, 2 plastic chairs, no other passengers. Isolated, uncomfortable. Noelle glanced at the setup, then back at the officers. Her internal alarms blared softly but steadily. She'd been in federal enforcement long enough to recognize when something was performative or predatory. She gave a slight smile. "Of course. Though I do have a flight to catch in under an hour." "We'll be quick," Stevens promised, already walking. She followed, suitcase clicking against the floor. As she walked, her eyes swept the ceiling. Cameras? Yes. One at the far end of the corridor. She mentally mapped it. She noticed a gate agent chatting with a family nearby, a janitor buffing the tiles, 2 men in suits walking past with coffee cups. Witnesses. Good. They reached the folding table. "Please place your bags here," Stevens said, smile gone. Noelle complied, setting her carry-on and laptop bag on the metal surface. Stevens unzipped her suitcase and immediately began pulling items out with less than careful hands. Dress shirts, toiletries, a pair of heels, all exposed, some tossed to the side. Chen opened the laptop satchel and began removing items one by one. He opened her notebook, flipped through a few pages, pulled out a small makeup bag, and handled it with an unnecessary level of scrutiny. "So," Stevens began casually, eyeing a conference badge clipped to a folder. "You're here for work, consultant it says? That must pay well." Noelle gave a tight smile. "Risk analysis and compliance." Chen chuckled dryly. "Fancy. Traveling alone? Seems unusual for a woman going to a big conference." Noelle didn't respond. The insinuation hung in the air. Stevens picked up her wristwatch, a sleek Tissot she'd removed during TSA screening. He examined it with open curiosity. "Nice piece. Consultant life must be good." "It was a gift," she replied, voice flat. He nodded, but there was something darker in the look he exchanged with Chen. They weren't searching for security threats. They were probing for weakness. "Which hotel were you staying at?" "Downtown's not cheap," Chen said casually. Noelle's eyes locked on him. "The conference arranged it." The 2 officers seemed disappointed by the answers, not that they found nothing illegal, but that she remained unshaken. Stevens zipped the bag shut. "Well, there are some inconsistencies in your travel profile that need verification," he said vaguely. Noelle tilted her head. "Such as?" "We can't disclose that. Internal protocols. But until it's resolved, we may have to detain you briefly. It could take an hour or 2. Maybe more." Noelle didn't flinch. She knew this game. Stevens leaned in slightly, voice softening with faux empathy. "Of course, if you'd like this to go faster, sometimes we can expedite these things." Noelle's expression didn't change, but inside, the shift had occurred. She knew exactly what was happening. And now, it was time to see how far they were willing to go. Noelle Carter had faced corruption before, in briefing rooms, court testimonies, even during high-level federal investigations. But this felt different, more personal, more deliberate. Here in the fluorescent-lit corner of Hartsfield-Jackson, surrounded by two officers pretending to serve security, she was a target, not a traveler. "We need to verify a few internal discrepancies," Stevens repeated, still vague. Noelle's voice was calm. "Discrepancies? What kind?" "We can't say. Internal systems," Chen replied quickly, eyes avoiding hers. Stevens leaned forward. "Listen, it's nothing to worry about. But it will take time. We can try to make it easier on everyone. Expedite the process." Noelle raised an eyebrow. "Expedite? You know," Stevens said with a slight shrug, his voice casual. "Sometimes a little appreciation makes things go smoother. You help us out, we help you out." A beat of silence passed between them. "You're asking for a bribe," Noelle said flatly. Chen visibly flinched. Stevens only smiled. "Call it what you want," he said. "We're just talking about saving you time." Noelle stood silently. Her body language was neutral, but inside, the heat of righteous fury stirred. She'd interviewed victims of these kinds of setups. She'd helped write the guidelines that these officers were now trampling. And yet, here she was. "Let me be very clear," she said, stepping slightly closer. "You are detaining me without a stated cause. You have searched my belongings without proper authority. Now you're implying that for a fee, I can skip additional scrutiny. That is bribery under Title 18, Section 201. Stevens' nostrils flared. "You trying to threaten us?" "No," Noelle said, voice firm. "I'm giving you one chance to stop." That was the turning point. Stevens motioned toward Chen. "Cuff her. Obstruction. Non-compliance." Chen hesitated. "Sir, maybe we should call for backup first." "Now, Officer Chen." Chen moved toward her, and Noelle, knowing resistance would only escalate, allowed it. The cold metal tightened around her wrists. It was absurd. A woman who had passed federal background checks a dozen times, who held classified clearance, being shackled in the middle of a terminal for daring to stand her ground. Stevens grinned. "We'll just hold you for questioning. Real quiet. You miss your flight? Well, that's on you." Chen began to rifle through her laptop bag again, more aggressively this time. "We'll check your ID thoroughly," Stevens muttered. "Might find more inconsistencies. Maybe even a fake credential or two. Who knows?" That's when Chen froze. His hand had touched something hard and leather-bound. Not a wallet, not a planner, not anything ordinary. He pulled it out slowly. The moment he opened it, his entire demeanor changed. His mouth opened, but no words came out. "What?" Stevens snapped. "What is it now?" Chen turned the wallet toward him. A gold-colored badge gleamed. "Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General." Next to it, an ID card. Name, Noelle Carter. Title, Inspector. Stevens stared. His eyes moved back to Noelle, whose face remained perfectly still. "No," he said softly. "This has to be fake." "You want to test it?" Noelle replied. Stevens took a step back, suddenly unsure of his voice. "Inspector?" Noelle nodded. "Special Investigations Division. My jurisdiction includes oversight of abuse of authority and corruption. Exactly what you just committed." The silence that followed was deafening. Chen was pale. "I didn't know. And yet you cuffed me on false charges, rifled through my things, watched your partner ask for a bribe. You knew enough." Stevens began to sweat. "Listen, we misunderstood. Thought there was a flag." "You lied," she interrupted. "You fabricated inconsistencies. You offered to erase them for a fee. That is not a misunderstanding." Noelle shifted her weight, the handcuffs still tight on her wrists. "Uncuff me, now." Chen obeyed, fingers trembling. Stevens tried to regain composure. "Look, we can handle this internally. No need for paperwork. I mean, everyone makes mistakes." Noelle stepped toward him. "Stop talking. Every word you say now is evidence." She retrieved her phone and dialed the OIG field office. She recited her call sign and badge number. The voice on the other end grew serious immediately. "I am currently at Atlanta Hartsfield Terminal D. I was stopped and illegally detained by two officers named Stevens and Chen. Bribery was solicited. False arrest was initiated. My badge was discovered during the search. I am requesting immediate internal affairs intervention." "Understood," the voice replied. "Dispatching supervisor and investigation unit now. Remain at your location." As she hung up, Noelle turned back to the officers. "You will remain here. You will not call anyone. You will not leave. If you move, I'll consider it obstruction. Stevens was shaking now. Please, Inspector. Save it. The only thing I want from you is your badge and your gun. Now. Chen removed his equipment first, laying it on the table with shaking hands. Stevens followed suit, clumsily unholstering his service weapon, laying it down beside the badge. 10 minutes later, a lieutenant and 2 internal affairs investigators arrived. They took statements, collected the badge wallet, reviewed airport security footage. Stevens and Chen were escorted away silently. As the chaos died down, Noelle stood alone, rolling her cuffs between her fingers. The lesson was simple. Predators often assume their prey is powerless. But sometimes the one they try to cage has the key to the whole damn system. The moment Officers Stevens and Chen were escorted from the screening area, a familiar hush settled around the corridor. Travelers walked past without realizing that a seismic shift had occurred in that quiet corner of Hartsfield-Jackson. Noelle Carter, now free of her cuffs, stood tall as her phone buzzed with a follow-up call from the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General. Inspector Carter, this is Agent Delaney from the Southeast Regional Office. Our response team is en route. I understand you're safe now? Affirmative. I'm in a secure position. Airport Internal Affairs has control of the 2 suspects. We've confirmed the preliminary report. We've also reviewed your live upload to the encrypted archive. You recorded the entire encounter? Most of it. Bodycam coverage from Officer Chen cuts out at key moments, but between airport security footage, my audio, and witness corroboration, there's more than enough. Excellent. Please remain at the terminal until DOJ representatives arrive. As Noelle ended the call, a young black woman wearing a Delta uniform hesitantly approached her. Ma'am, I just want to say thank you. Noelle turned, softening for the first time since the incident. For what? For standing up to them, the woman said, eyes welling. They've done this before. Not that far, but enough. You scared the hell out of them, and maybe it stops now. Noelle nodded quietly. It stops now. 30 minutes later, the DOJ's Regional Oversight Unit arrived in dark blue suits and government-issued tablets. They greeted Noelle with crisp nods, bypassed formalities, and got straight to work. Digital extractions from the TSA checkpoint, airport CCTV, and voice recordings were submitted to a secure server. Lieutenant Hargrave from Airport Internal Affairs arrived shortly after. A stocky man in his early 50s, Hargrave walked up with a tight jaw and a firm handshake. Inspector Carter, you have my sincerest apologies on behalf of this department. This should have never happened. No, it shouldn't have, Noelle replied, watching him closely. I'll need access to all previous complaints filed against Officers Stevens and Chen. Any suspensions, internal notes, or transfer requests? Everything. Hargrave gave a short nod. Already pulling their full personnel files. We're cooperating with the federal team. As they spoke, Noelle was handed a secure tablet. The live feed from Terminal D's security camera showed her interaction with Stevens and Chen from multiple angles. She rewound it to the moment Chen found her badge. Stevens' expression on camera was a portrait of disbelief and unraveling authority. Over the next 2 hours, Noelle dictated a full statement. Every step of the encounter was documented. Initial contact, suspicious questioning, bribery, physical restraint, and their reaction to her badge. With remarkable composure, she detailed the sequence, adding exact timestamps and officer quotes. As part of the federal response protocol, Stevens and Chen were now considered subjects in a multi-agency investigation. The Inspector General's office issued formal suspension recommendations within the day. Their weapons and badges were sealed in evidence lockers. Meanwhile, the DOJ's Legal Affairs Division confirmed that both officers' actions constituted violations of Title 18 U.S. Code Perf 242, Deprivation of Rights under Color of Law. Title 18 U.S. Code Perf 201, Bribery of Public Officials. False imprisonment under the Georgia Penal Code. But for Noelle, justice wasn't just about codes or arrests. It was about ensuring that what happened to her couldn't happen again to someone without a badge. By evening, news of the incident reached local media outlets. Breaking: federal inspector detained at Atlanta airport in suspected bribery attempt by airport police. The news cycle exploded. Though her name wasn't initially released, footage of Stevens trying to lecture her as she stood handcuffed quickly leaked. Noelle received calls from every direction. Fellow agents, former professors, even members of Congress. Everyone wanted a statement. But Noelle stayed silent. She wasn't interested in attention. She was focused on accountability. The following morning, she entered a DOJ-secured video briefing with Internal Affairs, OIG executives, and Atlanta Airport Police Command staff. The question on the table: what were the patterns behind Stevens and Chen's behavior? Lieutenant Hargrave began. We pulled 10 years of complaint records. Stevens had 4 prior misconduct allegations, most dismissed. 1 settled quietly. Chen is new. No prior formal complaints, but passenger feedback flagged inappropriate questions during security stops. Pattern of profiling? One OIG investigator asked. There's evidence of it, Hargrave admitted. Passenger demographics skew significantly toward women of color during unscheduled detentions. That was all the confirmation they needed. The DOJ issued an immediate ethics review of the Atlanta Airport Police screening protocols. By week's end, a federal mandate required all random stops post-TSA to be body camera recorded and accompanied by documentation. But the real twist came when the Internal Review Board discovered something else. Officer Stevens was on the short list for a federal task force position that would have granted him interagency clearance. That offer was now permanently revoked. Chen, facing less culpability but still guilty of compliance and abuse, offered to cooperate fully with investigators. In his written confession, he admitted, "I knew what we were doing wasn't standard procedure. I was told not to question Stevens. I regret it deeply. Inspector Carter had every right to do what she did." As a result of his cooperation, Chen was placed on unpaid leave pending a disciplinary tribunal, but was spared immediate termination. Stevens was not so fortunate. He was arrested 2 days later on charges of false imprisonment and solicitation of a bribe. The press release hit every major outlet. Veteran DOJ inspector exposes corrupt airport officers during detainment in Atlanta. Noelle didn't watch the coverage. She didn't need the headlines to validate her experience. She had the truth and a 79-page case file to back it up. A week after the incident, she was called into a closed-door hearing with the Deputy Attorney General and senior DOJ leadership. They thanked her for her restraint, her thoroughness, and above all, her integrity. "You reminded us why this office exists," one official said, "to hold even our own accountable." Noelle simply nodded. She wasn't here for praise. She was here to do the job. That night, she returned home to her apartment in D.C. She placed her badge on the entry table, her blazer over the chair, and exhaled. Justice had been served. But her work was far from over. The news didn't stay local for long. By noon the following day, national headlines carried versions of the same story. Federal inspector handcuffed by airport police in alleged bribery scheme. Cable news channels cycled through talking heads. One host on a popular morning program said it plainly: if she didn't have that badge, this would have gone very differently. And we all know it. Clips from the leaked CCTV footage flooded social media. People replayed the moment Officer Stevens' face changed upon seeing Noelle's badge. The internet did what it does best, spliced the footage into reels, memes, and breakdowns. A still image of Noelle standing firm in her blazer and slacks, flanked by trembling officers, became a symbol of resilience. But beneath the viral frenzy was something more powerful: solidarity. Civil rights organizations issued statements within hours. The National Bar Association praised Inspector Carter for her poise and called for mandatory federal oversight of all airport law enforcement personnel. Veterans groups were outraged. The Veterans of Color Coalition released a powerful letter. Inspector Noelle Carter served this country honorably. She then devoted her life to upholding the Constitution. That 2 officers believed they could humiliate, extort, and detain her shows how far we still must go. It didn't stop there. Multiple women who had flown through Hartsfield-Jackson International in the last 2 years came forward online, anonymously at first, then more boldly. They described being stopped, questioned, and treated like suspects during so-called random checks. The pattern was impossible to ignore. One woman, a nurse from Birmingham, recorded a teary video on TikTok. "I thought I was crazy," she said. "They stopped me last year, made me miss my flight. Said it was my earrings setting off alarms. I wasn't wearing any." The video gained over 4 million views. Meanwhile, within DOJ circles, the incident reignited a simmering debate. Should local airport police forces retain authority over passengers post-TSA clearance? Senator Alicia Freeman of Illinois, herself a former civil rights attorney, took to the Senate floor. If a federal inspector can be unlawfully detained in plain sight, what about a school teacher? A mother with her children? A college student in sweatpants? We must build safeguards that don't rely on someone being high-ranking enough to survive the abuse. She introduced a bill within 48 hours, the Passenger Safety and Transparency Act. It required all secondary screenings after TSA to be audio and video recorded, a clear, time-stamped record of the stated reason for each stop, an option for passengers to request a federal liaison during extended detentions. Though still in early stages, the bill gained surprising bipartisan traction, especially after the DOJ confirmed it supported the reforms. Inside the Atlanta airport, changes came even faster. Interim policies were put in place before the week ended. The new police chief, sworn in after the former chief resigned under public pressure, implemented immediate review of every unscheduled stop in the last 12 months, suspension of all discretionary searches until officer retraining, mandatory implicit bias training with civilian oversight. The cultural shift was palpable. One officer, speaking off record, admitted, "The mood changed overnight. We all realized if she hadn't been who she was, we'd still be doing it, unchecked." Noelle herself, meanwhile, maintained a low public profile. Her official statement was brief. "I did what any federal inspector is trained to do: observe, assess, act in accordance with the law. I trust that justice will continue its course." But outside the press rooms, her influence was felt in waves. At universities, her story was added to criminal justice and ethics case studies. In community centers, activists used her encounter as a blueprint for how to document abuse without escalating danger. Even within the OIG, young agents looked to her as a model. One emailed her anonymously, "Ma'am, I joined because I wanted to make things better. But your case reminded me why we do this. Thank you for not backing down." Perhaps most profound was the impact on passengers themselves. Within a month of the incident, Hartsfield-Jackson Airport set up a hotline specifically for travelers to report misconduct during screenings. Unlike the standard TSA complaint portal, this line was staffed with independent monitors and came with real-time response mechanisms. Reports spiked in the first 2 weeks, then gradually dropped, not because complaints were ignored, but because behavior changed. Officers knew they were being watched. Noelle never sought praise, but she didn't avoid responsibility either. She gave a closed-door briefing at the DOJ's annual ethics summit. There she said, "We don't get to choose who we're tested by, but we do get to choose how we respond." What happened at that terminal wasn't new. What was new was accountability, and that must become the norm. It was quiet after she spoke. Then, a standing ovation. In the aftermath, Stevens and Chen faced more than disciplinary action. Federal prosecutors confirmed that Stevens would face criminal charges. Chen, after testifying truthfully and cooperating, was placed on a deferred discipline track, allowed to resign without indictment, but barred from future law enforcement roles. Meanwhile, the viral image of Noelle, standing calm, arms at her side, 2 officers recoiling, was now displayed in a non-profit exhibit titled "When Power Meets Resistance." The plaque beneath it read, "Sometimes, courage doesn't need a shout, just a woman who knows the law, knows her worth, and stands her ground." For weeks after the incident, the ripple effects of Noelle Carter's confrontation at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport continued to reverberate throughout law enforcement, federal agencies, and the public at large. The Department of Justice, recognizing the exceptional circumstances of the case, fast-tracked its internal review. Within a month, Noelle's written report, painstakingly detailed and professionally unflinching, was made available to key oversight committees. Unlike most bureaucratic documents, hers read like a field manual on standing one's ground under pressure. Her account, corroborated by security footage and the testimonies of bystanders and airport staff, left no doubt about what had transpired. Criminal charges were filed against Officer Stevens for attempted bribery, unlawful detention, and abuse of authority. The court date was scheduled for early fall. He was released on bond, but had his badge revoked and was placed under a strict gag order. Officer Chen, having cooperated and expressed genuine remorse, entered a diversion program with mandatory ethics training and public service obligations, but he would never work in law enforcement again. Meanwhile, Noelle returned to work in Washington. While many in her office urged her to take time off, she declined. "There's work to be done," she said simply. And there was. She was invited to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee during hearings related to airport security and civil rights. Her testimony was measured but firm. "What happened to me was not unique in potential. It was unique in exposure. We cannot build a system where accountability hinges on who the victim is. It must hinge on what is right." Her words struck a chord. Senator Alicia Freeman's Passenger Safety and Transparency Act gained momentum, with added co-sponsors and growing public support. Noelle's name became synonymous with calm defiance and structural reform. The press nicknamed her the Quiet Gavel. Outside of Washington, other major airports began adopting their own versions of the reforms Atlanta had introduced. New York's JFK launched an independent traveler rights council. LAX began retraining its officers with a curriculum partially based on Noelle's experience. Chicago O'Hare partnered with local universities to study the impacts of discretionary police stops. Noelle herself was honored by multiple organizations, though she politely declined several high-profile awards. "Let the attention stay on the issue," she often said. Still, she accepted an invitation to speak at the National Association for Black Veterans Conference, where she received a standing ovation from an audience that knew, perhaps better than any, the cost of being both proud and black in uniform. At the same conference, she gave a quietly powerful speech. "We serve to protect the rights of others, but we must also fight to protect our own. Because justice, left unchecked, becomes a privilege instead of a promise." Her words were quoted, posted, and printed on banners in law schools and public service academies nationwide. But the truest measure of her impact came not from the headlines, but in the quieter places. A middle-aged black man in Atlanta stopped her outside a bookstore weeks later. "My daughter wants to go into law enforcement now," he told her, "because she saw you and said, 'That's who I want to be.'" The gratitude, she said later, was humbling, but also a reminder of how much work still lay ahead. Internally, Noelle began working on a new initiative within the OIG, a task force to identify abuse patterns in quasi-federal zones like airports, train stations, and border checkpoints. She assembled a diverse team and advocated for technological upgrades that would prevent another situation like hers: mandatory body cams, cloud-synced reporting, and a central database for complaints accessible to federal monitors. Within a year, her task force had published its first national findings. The data shocked many. Over 60% of discretionary post-TSA stops involved travelers of color. In over 80% of those cases, no contraband or violations were found. The findings fueled additional oversight reforms. But not everyone was pleased. Backlash came in waves. Some law enforcement unions accused her of vilifying officers. Political commentators tried to frame her actions as weaponizing her badge. Anonymous threats were sent to her office. But Noelle refused to be intimidated. "I stood up once. I'll do it again if I have to," she told her colleagues. Her resolve became a rallying cry within the Inspector General community. By the second anniversary of the incident, Hartsfield-Jackson Airport had been transformed. New policies, more diverse leadership, and a publicly accessible database of all discretionary stops were now in place. A mural had even been painted near the spot where Noelle was detained, abstract but unmistakably evocative. Two silhouettes, one in a uniform, rigid and shadowed, the other, upright, resolute, and stepping into light. A plaque beneath it bore a few simple words: "Truth stands firm, even when power wavers." That summer, Noelle received a letter. It was handwritten, slightly smudged with ink. It read, "You don't know me, but I was at the airport that day. I saw it from a distance. I didn't speak up, not then, but I've watched everything since, and now I know what courage looks like. Thank you." She folded the letter carefully, placed it in a drawer beside her DOJ credentials. Not for recognition, but as a reminder. That silence had once stood beside injustice. And now, because she didn't stay silent, the entire system had moved an inch closer to the truth. Every Stevens and Chen who is exposed and eliminated is a small but important contribution to cleaning up the system, protecting innocent people, and strengthening faith in justice, a faith that is already too fragile. The story is a powerful reminder of the dangers of power when it is placed in the hands of those who lack morals, are blinded by greed and prejudice. It shows how abuses of power, even those that begin small, can quickly escalate into serious transgressions, leading to an inevitable downfall. At the same time, it is a testament to the power of courage, of uncompromising determination in the face of wrongdoing, and the importance of those in positions of authority taking decisive action to protect integrity. The fight against corruption and abuse of power is a never-ending one, and every victory, however small, helps to push back the darkness and keep faith in a more just future. What do you think about how Inspector Noel Carter handled the confrontation with the two police officers?